All right. Good, Rick, thanks. All right. We'll call the meeting of the Finance Committee to order. Ask that we stand, Chris, and pledge allegiance to the flag. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Well, welcome, Mr. Brown, and welcome again, Tammy. We always look forward to the, to the presentation that Monitech presents. It's any budget presentation is certainly filled with a lot of numbers, and there's always questions about the numbers. But I always find that there's something educational in the presentation that you do, because you kind of get into the weeds a bit, which can be a little overwhelming sometimes.
Yes.
But it's thorough, and if you're on this end of the table and you've gone through it enough times as I have, you begin to understand the weeds, how they work. So we look forward to tonight's presentation. So that is the agenda tonight, is the presentation, so I'll just...
Do you want to introduce, because we have a
Oh,
few
yeah,
members.
Adrian, you were here.
I think
Yeah, you were here.
last year, but James
Mr.
was.
Brown came with Dr. Harrington, and he introduced us to him. James?
James Reed. I'm an awesome.
He's our second newest member.
Yeah, and our newest member, Anthony, has been a week, no, tomorrow.
Yeah.
Wow.
It's not a veteran, good job.
He's already gotten homework and had 3 committee
Oh,
assignments.
wow.
And now he's got a presentation from me.
Oh.
This will be your most memorable presentation so far.
It will be.
That I can believe.
You know you had
It'll
that.
help you sleep later.
All right.
So actually, I'm gonna get us started, so if you could just grab this packet. Clearly, the main purpose of this is to continue to go through the budget. But one of the things we like to do is make sure that we just give a quick update on some of the things that are going on in tech, but really emphasize some of the financial aspects that go beyond the traditional Chapter 70 budget and everything else. So we kind of go through it very quickly. We're very excited. Co-op is, the place where we have students working in the career field and everything else. Big year for that. Everything's going very well. Oh, that's right there. Oops. Which one? This one. Wrong one. Different one. Good page. All right. So the first one, looking at the anonymous donors on the first page. So we have our foundation, our community Monitech Foundation, and one day last year, a large corporation reached out and said, "Listen, you guys have an educational foundation. We'd love to learn how to do a foundation." So we kind of showed them the process. They said, "Well, we don't even know how to accept an application. What would an application look like? Could you put together an application to make it look like what it is?" So we sent them an example, and lo and behold, about a month later, they called us up and they said, "We're going to grant you what you filled out for $370,000. And what that allowed us to do was to get a planer, some sander, some saws for house carpentry, but most importantly there in the bottom right, it's going to allow us to replace our original spray booth and auto body, which goes back about 40, 50 years. So great opportunity there. We always talk about grants, and I'll show you a little summary of where we are, but we understand that grants takes off the issues that sometimes do when you're straining to cover things with just the general local budget. This is an example of the Mass Life Science grant. A great grant. We partnered with Fitchburg State to take a look at our anatomy and physiology course. Our students can now take that course, get college credit at Fitchburg State. It's going to save those students $1,500. But even better, we got $109,000 from the grant. And the device kind of in the bottom right there is called an animatage table. And literally what it is a virtual cadaver. Somebody who donated their body. They literally laid it out so you can literally go layer to layer to layer through the human body. In our health occupations program, our science program, really benefits from having that. And again, through grants. Speaking of grants, you'll see we've had a really good year. Total of $3.7 million in grants. Again, some of them are the basic Perkins grants and stuff, things that go through the government, but also some really big ones, one of which I'll really be highlighting in a little bit. Oftentimes, we take that grant money not just for equipment, but to do renovations around the school. Skills Capital Grant, we received one bottom left for dental, that allowed us to completely renovate our dental clinic space. To the right, auto technology, we totally redid our tool crib and everything else, really helps to focus on measurement for our students. And the school store didn't necessarily come through a grant, but we wanted to emphasize that because all this work was done by our students. We don't have to bring in contractors or anything. And even the school store, it looked miserable. If you've ever been to our school store, it was from the 1970s. We totally redid it, our house carpentry kids, our electrical kids. Just last week, we had our open house. It was open for about 3 hours during open house, and the business tech, the department that runs that, made $1,900 in one night. So it's going very well. We're really happy with that. I met with Justin in the fall and actually met with Superintendent King as well. And one thing that I always try, this is my number one thing for coming out here, projects. We want to try to do as many projects as we can for our communities. We did talk about potentially, I know Justin really wants to take a look at the cupola above. Unfortunately, the height for that work and everything else, it wasn't something that our students could necessarily do, but we did find some other projects that we could do to support. But that's just an example of some of the projects that we do. One of the things that also I see as a mission this year is working on clarifying things when it comes to Monty Tech. The pie chart that you're looking at there, somehow things started going around that 80% of the kids going to Monty Tech are going to college. Nobody's going into the workforce anymore. That is simply not true. This is our graduating class from last year. If you look at the 2 shades of blue and yellow, basically the 2 shades of blue add up to 49%, and then you have 45% in yellow. It's almost split in half, the kids going right into the workforce and going to college. And then if you flip the page, what really breaks it down is if you look at by shop. So if you look at our health cluster, dental assisting, health occupations, veterinary science, all our students in health occupations will get their CNA. They could walk out and go right into the workforce. If any of you are in the health field, you know CNAs are not making any money. If you want to be able to get a livable wage and everything else, you need to go on to college. So to see those kids, primarily going on to 2- and 4-year colleges, that's not surprising. But then when you look at the construction trades, our electrical kids, 17 of the 21 going right into the workforce. House carpentry, 10 of the 13 going right out into the workforce. Plumbing, 16 of the 17 going right out into the workforce. So the trades that you would expect going into the workforce are going into the workforce. The ones that you would think that we looking at college are going to college. This is not your mom and dad's vocational school anymore. This is not just about construction trades. It's about a lot of trades that kids have to go on to college. In the next couple slides, I'm not going to go through them all, but they really take a look at some of the things we do both for supporting kids, getting connections with colleges, and taking kids directly to employers and getting to know those employers and finding jobs. And our co-op coordinator, Ms. Curry, again, you can take a look at our co-op numbers here. Currently 176 kids out on co-op. Basically half half our senior class is going out on co-op. They have jobs instead of going to shop, which is just fantastic.
Tom,
Yes.
when health occupations, give me some examples.
What do you mean by examples?
What, you've got plural in there, so I know what a dental assistant is, veterinary assistant, but what's a health occupation?
So health occupations pretty much is nursing.
Just
It's very much nursing focused, but we don't. I mean, we break down, when you look at nursing, we break down all the different types. So the kids come out, they have their home health aid certification. So kids can get their phlebotomy certification.
Okay.
So it's not just that it's your basic general nursing
Okay.
field. A lot of them, because a lot of our affiliations are with the senior centers. A lot of them are getting the care going outward specifically to that population.
Right.
So it's a variety of nursing.
That's what I was thinking of, that we
Mhm.
were making connections.
Are you in the medical field?
Excuse me?
Are you in the medical field, Mr. Dixon?
Broadview Assisted Living.
Oh, very good, yes,
So we have
absolutely.
CNAs coming and going all the time.
Yep, yeah, so you know, definitely, yeah.
Absolutely, very tough.
Yep,
Very tough.
absolutely. So, after co-op there, very quickly, we do have a program, it's called CTI. That's a state initiative that helps support underemployed and unemployed adults that we train at workforce training at night Again, a series of grants. The great thing about CTI, the money comes to the school, and yes, it's for the adult programs, but obviously, for instance, the example, you can see the programs on page 15, welding, HVAC, and we buy equipment and buy new tools to support those adult. Obviously, our kids can use those tools during the day. So this is great. This is, again, more money coming in that we don't have to rely on Tammy and Chapter 70, and she's more than happy to do that and everything else. The last thing I'm going to try to go through very quickly, we want to make sure everyone knows about a major initiative that we're doing. It's this Monty Tech Partnership Program that you can see on page 17. Moving into the position as superintendent, I knew, and I'm sure you've seen in the papers, we have way too many kids applying for the number of spots that we offer. This current freshman class had 370 students, yet 850 kids applied for those 370 spots. So we know there's a lot of kids who are disappointed who can't get into Monty Tech. What we wanted to do, and I spoke to my administrative team and said, how can we expand the number of kids coming here? We don't have the room in the building. We need to consider other options. So this is a picture right here of 270 Westminster Street. It's a warehouse down the street that most recently was being used by Watchers Brewery cold storage. We have now leased this warehouse. What we did is a couple slides down, pages down, so as we can kind of skip right to page 21. Me with hanging out with Governor Baker, we do it all the time. The state put out a lab modernization grant, $1.9 million for us, that allows us to renovate the building. 30% of that $1.9 million can be used to renovate the building. Our own students are going to do the renovations with our instructors. We're going to divide that warehouse and create 3 vocational programs: house carpentry, electrical. That's what we're going to start out with. Then we're going to add plumbing eventually. We'll use it at night for the CTI students, the adults. But during the day, what we did is we partnered with the districts that were on that first page there: Gardner, Fitchburg, and Narragansett. And we picked those 3 because we were considering this program. Those 3 districts of our sending districts had the most students on the wait list. So we thought it was fair to go to them first. And what we said to them is, we're going to have this building. You pick students. We're not picking the students. The sending districts are going to pick which students are going to be coming. Those students stay enrolled, so they don't lose the Chapter 70 money for those kids. They keep that Chapter 70 money within their district. The money that will come to Monty Tech is the Chapter 74 money, which Kenny's really going to explain about how that works if you're not aware of it or how it works. That money will come to us, so we'll be using those student assessment money and the Perkins money to pay for this program. But I want to make sure that I'm emphasizing to all the finance committees, no Chapter 70 money is being used for this program. Because I'm sure your reaction would be, well, we don't see Murdoch up on that table, what's going on, and we're paying for this. No, we are not using, and I'm not going to go through it all, but at the end of this packet, you can see there's slides that lay out exactly how we're financing this program. Our goal is to give this a shot. This is technically called an After Dark program. It's supported by the state. It explains it on page 19. But basically what it is that the state said, regional vocationals, you're open at night, open up, try to get your sending districts in here. The reality is, when we met with the superintendents, they said, Tom, our kids work after school. They need to go to those second jobs, they're supporting their families. They do football, they do theater. They can't do it after school. So we said, we're gonna do this during the school day. It's not gonna affect our day program because we have a separate facility. So we're down the road doing this project. It'll follow our model. There'll be A week, B week. So juniors from these districts will come to us 1 week, and then they alternate with seniors coming the next week. They're not going to get all the training that our kids traditionally get, but they will walk out graduating, ready to go out right into the workforce. They'll get things like 10-hour OSHA card, which you have to go into the workforce. They'll get, the house carpentry kids will do hot works. They'll have certifications that will go with it. We're really excited about it. We just submitted the MOUs and the application on Friday. Our goal would be, if this works well, is to expand it. And when I met with Justin, I said, when we look at the number of kids on a wait list, Winchendon's right there. If we expand, we'd like to get Winchendon involved in this. So someday, hopefully, I'll be sitting here, and maybe it's, we've had people reaching out to us saying, we have a building that you guys could use. So we know that people are offering buildings, and we have opportunities to expand. The problem is to do the renovations, it's gonna take us this year with our kids doing it. So this won't actually open until, it'll open in the spring of '24 for the adults and fall of '24 for the students. But we're very excited about this. We think this will become a model for the state. So we're really excited about that. So I'm not necessarily gonna go through all the slides that go with that, but you can see it does talk about the lease rate that we had and again, how we're paying for it and everything. So we got no Chapter 70 money going into that from the other
Or
districts.
local assessment money.
Correct.
To Tom's point with that, we recognize the need to add vocational seats. You're reading that in the paper every day. But if we added 50 or 80 more students to Monty Tech, which we don't have room for, that would start decimating the budgets of the towns even more. So we're kind of and hoping to look at this as a win-win. They will still keep their Chapter 70 funds. They'll still get their local contributions towards those students. And they'll just pay us the delta in the funding from the state. So, along with our CTI funds, Willis is paying for it, and the Perkins funding. So I hope they look forward to it.
It's an interesting program. I applaud you for moving in that direction. When you pointed out the pie chart,
Yes.
everybody's plans, I was
Yep.
thinking, we're looking at that pie chart 20 years ago, it looked very different.
Oh, absolutely.
And I recognize that the world of work is changing. But the other thing that's changed very much, because the world of work is changing, is the profile, I guess, of the kids that go to the folk tech schools, or Monty Tech or any of the folk tech schools. And clearly, there's a segment of the population that's been left behind, that no longer can get into the schools. So this seems as though it's a program that would begin addressing another opportunity perhaps for kids who want to do that. Because I think anybody that's tried to get a tradesman around here lately would tell you that there's a real shortage of tradesmen, which is the other maybe unintended result of the model changing in the state's folk tech schools. Funding still reflects a heavily industrial-oriented school department, but that's a discussion for another time. But I think that it's certainly a program that's got merit to try it, because it creates another opportunity for kids who aren't getting it right now.
Absolutely.
That's our plans. That's our hopes.
Right.
Okay, well, I am going to move on to
Right.
the budget plan. So, I know some of you can do this presentation for me, if you'd like to. Here it is.
I look forward to it.
Yeah. So, our budget, much like all the school districts and municipalities, is based on the governor's numbers. Those are the numbers we come to you with to ask that you put on your town warrant. So I always like to start out with kind of the overview of what happened at the House with Chapter 70. So you can see Governor Healy's budget puts out a $586 million increase in FY '24 over '23, and continues to fund the Student Opportunity Act, which was where the legislature committed to higher fund certain categories in the foundation budget, and they're listed on this list, because these areas of the foundation budget were not keeping up with actual spending by districts and inflation factors. So this is the third year of implementation. They're hoping for 6 years. So each year they increase these rates a little higher, and you'll see that on the next slide. This is the Monty Tech foundation budget. So each foundation budget is broken out by categories, the rows 1 through 11, and to school population ages. So you can see 1 through 7 is preschool through vocational. Each grade level has a different level of funding for the different like roles, administration, instructional leadership, etc. All the way up to vocational. Vocational gets the highest funding for regular type education, as it is the most expensive model of education, not counting special ed, because vocational schools do everything a comprehensive school district does, plus operate vocational programs. So you can see all of Monty Tech students are in column 7. We have 1,465 students. That's our foundation enrollment number, which is pupils that attend Monty Tech. That's also pupils that reside in our municipalities that may attend other vocational schools, school choice, as well as we have a Chapter 74 practical nursing program for those in-district pupils that attend that program. The next columns, 8 through 13, are a duplicative count of the students that are in row 7. But what the state does is they give you what they call an above base for these categories of pupils, because again, these are higher categories of costs for educating. Column 8 is special ed in district, and that says 72 students. Well, we have more than 72 special ed students, it's more.
Actually, about 230 special.
Yes. What this is, and over to the left, kind of bottom half of the sheet, it's kind of the legend to what's working for this. And you can see the third sentence down, special ed in district is an assumed percentage, and it represents a 3.9% for K to 12 and 4.9% for vocational education. So that's where that number comes into play. And they do that for every school district. It's an assumed percentage. And we get the additional monies there. In column 9, special ed tuition out. Monty Tech doesn't have any there because you need to be a student going to Monty Tech to be a student at Monty Tech. The next 3 are your ELs, and that's the grade breakdown. So we're in column 12 with high school vocational, and we have 10 EL students. That's our actual count. There's an additional above base attributed to that you can see going down that column. And then column 13 is low income. And low income is based on the state. We do not, well, we still do collect applications like we've done in the past, but what the state really pulls this number from is their system for Mass Health and SNAP and other type benefits that they link students to. So that's where that comes into play. We are considered low income group 7 if you're looking at that little blue chart below. So that means we have 36 to 41.99% of our pupils are considered low income. And we get an additional bump, again, above base for those. They take all those numbers, add them up to column 14, except for the count of pupils. That's where they get the totals. In the bottom total, 29,486,021 represents our foundation budget. Foundation budget is synonymous with net school spending in our case. They take that number and divide it out by the 1465. And our foundation budget per pupil, as you can see, is $20,127. That means our minimum required spending per pupil is $20,127. That does not count transportation, capital, or debt service. Those are all above and beyond this minimum spending requirement.
It's a, excuse me, it's a pretty dramatic increase in both Chapter 70 and then the required contribution from the units. Just took a look at that, it was on page 2 of the presentation, but and it shows 5 or 6 years worth of figures. It's interesting, I mean, from the first 2 years, from 18 to FY '20, the increase was about 3.7%. 21 to 22, it was less than 1%.
Yes.
And then from 22 to 24, it's 18.3%, 9% a year.
Yep.
And I realize that's a state formula, it's nothing to do with what
Sure.
you put
Yes,
together,
sure
I
is.
understand this, but
Yeah.
I'm trying to point out that for lots of communities who are very similar to Monty Tech in that your budget isn't much more than the required net school spending, and that's true with Murdoch too, or Winchton. The required increase for the town, which is for the average for the last 2 years is 7%, tends to be a much, faster growing figure than the town can cover in its own growth of revenues. So it's created for a lot of communities a real hardship because it's required to send money to the town, to chapter 70. I mean, I think that, I agree that chapter 70 needed to be adjusted. But essentially we're taking 30 years of a poor formula and making up for it in 4 or 5 years.
Right.
And communities like Winchton just can't do that.
We actually met with some of our state and local reps to discuss that very issue. Rep Slotnick and Joe Comerford, and they understood, and, but, oh my
They
God.
come up with a
they did
strategy.
Yeah, right.
something very
Yeah.
quickly.
Yeah. And we are totally sensitive to that, and that's why our budget literally is at its
Bare
0.5%. It's 150,000 over our required
Required
spending,
net school spending.
because we recognize that too is happening. And I know it's nice to see like our spending requirements go up, but when I look at the increase to the communities too, I go, like, I don't wanna see that type of jump either.
No,
So,
no, and I do understand this is something
Right.
within your control, but I
Right.
think people need to be aware of it so
Yes.
that they can speak to their legislators and
Yep.
advocate for the community.
yes.
Because on the flip side of it, the local school district is seeing the same kind of increase, 7, 8, 9%. So it's a double whammy.
Yeah,
But,
we-
but
we-
I think it's really good that you do stress that these are not your figures. And continue to stress just how close you are to that net school spending line, because like Tom says, and, we're getting more and more educated with different communities, but they need to hear it,
Mhm.
because just trying to figure out chapter 70 and net school spending, somebody said it makes my head hurt, but they need to understand at least some of the basics, and it's out of your control.
Yeah, it
Right.
is.
And unfortunately, there are even, towns that they'll see that their assessment goes up and their enrollment went down, and it's very confusing to them, and that's a situation where I have to
It's
say,
so slight
it has
increase,
nothing to do
yeah.
with the formula in and of itself
is
for
what
the
it is,
statement,
that's
and
right.
that's what it is.
Yeah. But I also think, I like that you give us these to show us what is available to the students,
Yeah,
and that's important.
that's what we
And
try
I
to
know
do.
why you have a 800 student wait list.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Sure, yeah, we are fortunate.
In towns that are, a little more affluent than Winchton, say, the state average is about 20%, and most budgets about 20% more than required net school spending.
Mhm.
Yeah.
They get that whole 20% to negotiate with. You don't have to add 9% automatically to the town share.
Right.
They can negotiate, and I think what you'll start seeing is those averages coming down a little bit as the schools take advantage, certainly of was the opportunity, which I'm not speaking against. But it's a different reality, a different opportunity to try to negotiate a safe landing for community. Okay.
Well said,
I didn't
Rick.
buy it. Soapbox.
No, trust me, it's true statements.
Yep.
And Dr. Ward's point, that is why I go through the numbers so heavily, because our budget is so driven by the state's numbers. So actually now I'm back on the fourth slide, that's the FY24 Chapter 70 summary. So the left side is the calculations for Chapter 70. I like to focus on the right side. It's just the comparison from 23 to 24. You can see our foundation enrollment went down 2 pupils, but Mr. Kane's point, our foundation budget went up almost 1.6 million or 5.55%, as well as required district contributions went up in total by 451,000 or 4.2%. And our Chapter 70, and Chapter 70 is literally in this case taking the foundation budget, subtracting what the state has calculated for required contributions from all of our districts, and they fill in the gap. So that's where our Chapter 70 comes in at 18,318,704, which is a 6.38% increase. Moving on to show how does that reflect in our budget. The budget summary. So you can see that our net school spending is 29,486,021. That's, I just showed you how that was arrived at. Again, a 5.55% increase calculated by the state. Transportation, the $2,399,080 is our contractual agreements with our bus companies. We have 30 buses and 3 vans that support our school district, as well as our special education transportation is there. So that's a 3.6% increase. I just told you our above net school spending for this budget is $150,000. That represents 0.5% above. And we try to keep our capital budget each year within the $450,000 to the $500,000 range. So we're looking for those kind of medium range repairs that we need to make. And we had a facilities conditions assessment done. I want to say it was about 4 years ago now. So we work off of that. They prioritize high, medium, low priority. So we work from that list, especially starting with safety. So that's where our capital comes into play. And vehicles, that is just going to be a trailer from one of our shops. So the net increase for both of those is $15,000. You can see that brings us to our total budget, $32,535,101. That's an increase of 5.6%, 6.4%. It's going pretty much in alignment with our required net school spending increase. The next line is Chapter 70. I showed you that the state, how they factor that. That leaves the required minimum contributions for all our communities, $11,167,317. The next component down, the $2.5 million, that's the adding the transportation from above and the above net school spending to get that. Then we subtract from that what we're estimated to get for transportation aid from our cherry sheets. So that's the $1,700,000. The next line, that says Regional Transportation Fund. We have a Regional Transportation Reimbursement Special Revenue Fund. And the purpose of that fund is when we receive, or when and if we receive excess transportation aid above what we budgeted for that fiscal year, So in other words, in FY '23, the year we're in, if we receive more than that 1,549,256 that I budgeted for this current year, the school committee votes to put that additional money into that reimbursement fund. Then the requirement is the amount in that fund must be used for the following fiscal year to reduce assessments to communities. So right now, the 75,000 that I'm showing for FY '24 is a conservative estimate of what we could get above this current year's transportation. The school committee has certainly increased that when the final budget is determined, when we get our final payment for transportation in June. The next piece that we're using to offset the assessment is 250,000 from E&D. So that's leaving a net assessment to all our towns for this section, $524,080. The next, yes,
Just a question,
sure.
is there a, what's the amount that's in the E&D account
Sure.
overall?
I'm very glad you asked. At the bottom
On
of
the
your
corner.
sheet, at the very bottom,
Uh,
our excess and deficiency balance, which was certified by the Department of Revenue, is $1,006,541, or 3.1%. So regional school districts are allowed to carry a balance up to 5% in their
so I was gonna ask
E&D.
you, what's the limit?
5%. 5% of the previous year's budget, of the following year's budget, excuse me. So we are certainly not at that cap. And between this E&D and the other E&D, 450,000, we'll be using half of it to offset this budget. That brings us to the net capital assessment of 300,000. So you can see the total assessments to all communities, 11,991,397, which is a 5.63% increase to our communities, much like our total budget increase. The next slide shows you a breakdown by function of where this budget increase is coming in. I'm gonna outline some of the larger increases, so in the teaching services, and in all of this budget, it holds the COLAs for the staff, entire staff. It holds the step and column movements for all staff as well. So that's representative there. The textbooks and instructional materials, you'll see that has a large increase. That is partially due to our consumable costs. Inflation, you see it every day, you feel it in your own pocketbook, you feel it everywhere. Our school is a large consumer of all of those products. Food, copper, wire, lumber, gas, welding gases, name a few. We are seeing shops who are having increases of 20% or better in their consumables accounts, which is crazy.
The school receives ESSER grant.
Yes,
None of that would be included in any of this presentation.
No. none of that is in there.
Just curious about, about what the amounts look like on the ESSER grants.
Sure. So the first grants was small, it was like 60 or 70,000.
Yeah.
Basically purchased PPE with it. Second grant, ESSER 2, we received about 600,000. And how we utilized that is we used our paraprofessionals and we rotated them every other week, and they became special education instructors. They were certified. So they shared week because we needed to have additional special ed support during the pandemic. We added hours to our psychologists for mental health supports. We developed a program for students who were in directed study. It's a social emotional kind of training. So we had a half-time social studies teacher who was also teaching those half-time. We funded that through ESSER. We paid for all of summer school. We had summer camps, we had learning loss academies, rising academy. And we paid for it all for students, provided all the transportation, meals, everything free of charge for the past 2 summers. We plan to do that again this summer. We also held some after-school vocational programming for students who needed, so we paid the teachers to stay after school to work with the kids, catch up on some of the losses they had in their jobs as well. We've had hundreds of thousands in updating HVAC units. We updated 4 or 5 of those, we updated our controls for the building. We actually purchased 3 CNC machines for our advanced manufacturing shop with it. That was part of ESSER 3. I could go on.
Instructional technology.
Instructional technology that alone,
Yeah.
with, when we did remote learning. I know, it sounds like you're getting, you know, oh, we got 600,000 and then ESSER 3, we got 1.4 million. It sounds like a lot, and then you start, you know, zoom, it is a lot, right, but,
But you, it sounds like you're using it, you know, certainly for programs that, you know, have a shelf life.
yes,
Or one-time purchases that to improve,
Yes.
the quality of instructional materials, things of that nature.
yeah. We did not set ourselves up by hiring a lot of new FTEs,
Yeah.
to have funding that we could
Good.
sustain. Yep. Let's see, student transportation, again, this number includes all of our transportation, so it's before and after school transportation, as well as the contracted stuff, as well as field trips, athletic trips, that's all the stuff in there. Another big increase, which I probably could be coming here for the next 10 years and say this every year, benefits. Health benefits are going up 6%, and it sounds sad to say this, but we feel blessed that it's only 6%. Especially post-COVID, when now everybody's doing everything, we're self-insured, so we were, I mean, not happy about a 6% increase by any means,
No,
but.
it's not a 9 or a 10.
Correct, correct. So that's still representative in here. Another thing, another piece of equipment that I just wanted to outline that we're purchasing through our textbook and instructional material lines is for automotive technology. It's about a $55,000 piece of equipment, and it's a hybrid/electric vehicle trainer. Because our students need to learn how to work on those vehicles, because that's the way of the future. So that's one of the other large purchases that makes up that line item increase.
About the PD program, is there something specific
We're,
you're doing with that?
For professional development?
Yeah.
I mean, we did a lot of the trainings that Tammy was talking about towards the ESSER. A lot of the PD for things like co-teaching for our inclusion teachers, teaching teachers how to transition to our new special education data system and everything else. A lot of the student base focused on trying to train them to address, I mean, as I'm sure is happening in all the districts around here, the social and emotional health issues have been tremendous. That's really what we've been focused
so
on.
we're still focused with that, is a focus, as well as a lot of our teachers having done professional development in the last 2 or 3 years, because there wasn't anything out there, and they're coming on license renewals, their vocation license renewals, so we had to put a little bit extra in there this year to make up for what they haven't done in the last couple of years professionally, to keep their licensure and those little things that we let them have.
Can I ask a question?
Of course.
When you mentioned about the education for the students in the automotive program, and you purchased a hybrid vehicle for them to learn to
Trainer.
repair, or
It's
trainer.
Yeah, simulator.
Have you looked a little farther down the line, or not so far down the line, with all-electric trainer? Because that's moving constantly fast and forward. And just to give them the advantage to have that as well. More than being purchased, obviously at some point in time, they require less maintenance, we're being told, but at some point in time, getting them ready for that part as well as a hybrid. Is there any interest or any thoughts into looking at all electric types of trainer systems?
Yeah,
Is this a combo, the one we're getting?
correct. And the other thing is basically everything you do now in auto tech for the training is all simulators. It's a wide variety of electrical cars
Okay.
in terms of exhaust systems.
Right.
You know, you look at for HVAC in terms of things that are going up. One of the things we purchased recently is a fake home, essentially, that allows them to do energy audits. Because energy audits are the thing now, that's the way you save money, you get those rebates and everything else. It allows the kids right in the shop to do an estimated energy audit of how much heat is, they use thermal imaging cameras to see how much heat is leaving the building and everything else. So yeah, we're trying to keep up with the different environmental and other improvements that are happening, make sure it's right up to date.
Even on that point, about total solar systems,
Yep.
homes and things like that, how to diagnose, how to install, how
Exactly,
to.
exactly, that's what they're doing.
Okay.
Yeah, the days of the basic water heater,
Yeah, right.
that's long
No.
ago. Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
I am gonna make a note that Mr. Dixon thought maybe we should increase our budget a little more for these additional trainings.
Yes. Duly noted.
You're fired.
Charge that to Mr. Dixon.
No, we appreciate that.
Creative license, yeah.
One thing I was also gonna say is because we just kind of think it's interesting, one of the other big expenses in terms of the textbooks
Oh.
and equipment, we hadn't updated our Spanish textbooks since 2011. So we thought it was maybe about time, because part of that truly is, one of the things that we're looking for is implicit bias in textbooks and everything else. And you can look through some of the textbooks that were made even 10 years ago and see they're not very open to multicultural essence, or whatever you want to call it. So we're very happy to have that purchase as well.
Okay, so that's kind of an outline of our spending. The next slide shows our enrollment counts. So the left side is the foundation enrollment for each of the communities in our district. You can see for Winchendon, it's 106 students in our foundation enrollment, which is a decrease of 3. The other, so that's the basis for your operation assessment portion there. The next side, the school attended children, is those numbers are provided to my office by the superintendent of schools. And it's for students who are eligible to be in grades 1 through 12, no kindergarten, because it wasn't in the district, it was in kindergarten when the district agreement was established. So those are the numbers that are provided to me. So you can see Winchendon's numbers were 1,488. Over our total student, school attending children for the district is 25,346. Now those numbers translate to the next line.
Ma'am,
Yes,
can you kind of give me an idea of why we dropped 3 students from 109 to 106? Was there a reason for that?
It could literally, that's a number that literally just could have been in graduation, that's that the incoming freshman class might not have been as the outgoing senior class or something like that. It's not a significant number, it's not that the quota didn't drop or anything like that.
Oh, okay, all right.
Yeah, no.
one thing too that's probably important to say as we're talking about quotas.
I know where you're going.
Our towns are used to getting extra seats above their quota, because Holden and Harvard, 2 of our towns, did not ever come close to their quotas. Harvard still does not,
Yep.
they're still shy.
Holden's
Holden-
increased 23 kids in that
Holden
year.
actually meets their quota and has a waiting list, so there's no more of those seats available.
Open slots, yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
so you filled your quota, but didn't go above it.
Oh, okay.
They went from maybe having 16 kids apply and get accepted because nobody else applied, to over their quota plus another 15 or 16 kids. So
Yeah.
things changed in Holden quite a bit.
So what those numbers translate to is the percentages on the next slide. So when you, yes, I did at the beginning, I think that foundation enrollment, people's,
Because keep in mind that foundational enrollment isn't just the students in the building, it's also the LPN students and school choice students as well. So they just made that maybe a change for LPN, and although Tammy has the actual numbers right then.
Winchendon's enrollment is 102 students. 3 school choice students and 1 practical nurse.
So that just might have been maybe one more, or two or three less LPM students.
Yeah, or school choice.
Yeah.
So that puts Winchendon at 7.24% of our operating budget. The capital side, Winchendon represents 5.87%. So not only does that determine your capital apportionment, but it also, to Mr. Brown's last statement, it's your quota, it's your freshman quota number as well. So the school committee just approved at last month's, or this past month's meeting, a freshman class of 365 students. So Winchendon will get, your quota will be 5.87% of that class. I think that's a good chart to see. The next slide shows the change in foundation enrollment amongst the towns. So yes, going back to Holden, they increased 23 students this year alone. So you can see how the town's foundation enrollment changed. The next column is the required minimum contribution changes and set by the state. The next slides are going to show you how that's determined. So for Winchendon this year, the required minimum is $650,523.
I remember when I first started here, we were at 0, and then at 8.
The next slide shows you how that's calculated. So what they do for every, this, Mr. Dixon, is we'll refer to the weeds, this part. So how they
Good weeds.
So how they determine every community's required contribution is based on the same formula. For row 1, they take the community's 2022 equalized property valuation. So you can see Winchendon's property valuation. The next row, row 2, uniform property percentage, 0.3534%. They use that percentage calculated for every community from A to Z in the Commonwealth against the uniform property percentage. What the state does is they take the total foundation budgets for every school in the entire state, and they get that number. It's like $8 billion off the top of my head. They get that number. Then they come up with what they're funding from Chapter 70. Or I should say, what all the towns are contributing to that foundation budget number. So let's say all the communities in the state are contributing, need to contribute $8 billion to that, $10 billion, or $5 billion to that. Then what they say is, how can we split evenly the amount a community has to pay from property value and from citizen income. And that's how they come up with these percentages, have it equalized throughout the state. So that's why it's used for every community. So they come up with Winchendon, row 3, what they call your local effort from property wealth. This is what the state says Winchendon can afford to pay from its property wealth towards the schools, $3,477,108. Row 4 is the income level. So they use the 2020 income of the citizens of the town. They multiply it by that uniform income percentage, 1.5329%, which again, A to Z, use that percentage for every community. And they say Winchendon's ability to pay from income is the $4,256,173. And they add that to row 3, and they come up with what they call a combined effort yield, $7,733,281. Essentially, the state says, this is what we think Winchendon can afford to pay to all its schools. The next row, 8, is foundation budget. That is the foundation budgets for all of the schools that Winchendon belongs to, and Winchendon's a piece of it. So that's the $22,267,067. So So that's Winchendon and Monty Tech, and it's your portion of Monty Tech's foundation budget. Row 9, maximum local contribution, 82.5%. The state says no matter how wealthy a community is, they're gonna get some state aid Chapter 70 funds, at least 17.5%, even if you can afford to pay well above your foundation budget. So they cap it. So the most you would pay would be 18 million. The next row, 10, takes the lesser of that maximum, or what they said you could actually afford, which is row 7. So that's where they put the 7,733,281. Then I move over to the next slide, row 13. The state then says, what is Winchendon paying this year as its required contribution to all of its schools? That's the 6,472,829. The next row is the municipal revenue growth factor as determined by the Department of Revenue. That again is new growth that the state says you have money within or funding within your levy limits. There's a bunch of stuff that goes into that by the Department of Revenue. That's a different number for every community. For Winchendon, it's 3.75%. So they multiply that by what you paid this year, and they said for Winchendon, row 15, your preliminary contribution is 6,715,560. Well, they moved down to 21 because they say, oh, that's a shortfall from what we think you can pay in the left column of 7,733,281. How much of a shortfall? 1 million. What percentage is that of a shortfall? That represents a 4.57% shortfall. So you can see under 23, they are going to add 1% if the shortfall is in between 2.5% and 7.5%, which in this case it is. So they add 1% they multiply 1% to row 13, which is what you're currently paying. And that's where the additional 64,728 comes into play. They add that to row 15, what they came up with for this year. And that's how they come up with row 26, your required contribution for FY24 in total to all your districts, 6,780,288. The next line shows you how that gets divvied up between Winchendon and Monty Tech. The top, rows 1 through 4, is just simply this year's data. Rows 5 through 9 is based on FY24. So you can see row 6 shows your foundation enrollment in Winchendon, 13, 19, and your foundation enrollment in Monty Tech. Then row 7 shows your share of that district's foundation and budget. So in Monty Tech's case, I mean in Winchendon's case you'd represent all of it, but in Monty Tech's case, how they come up with it for Winchendon is they take the 106 students that you have and they multiply it by the very first number I talked to you about, 20,127 per pupil. And that's how they come up with Winchendon's foundation budget for Monty Tech. They add the two and get the total foundation budgets, and they say what percentage of that total do each of these foundation budgets represent? Well, in Monty Tech's case, we represent 9.59% of the total. So then what they do is they take 9.59% of row 5, which is what the state determines your required contribution would be for this year to all your schools, 6,780,288, and that's what they set the requirement to be for Monty Tech. In this case, that's a decrease of 9,104 from FY24 to FY23.
But based on 3 fewer students.
Correct.
Yeah. 20,000 apiece, so it's 60,000.
Correct. So it's not a straight up shot. No, it isn't. The next slide, I like to give you, it shows a 2-year comparison of your assessments, where each category falls. So you can see, I'm looking at 24, your foundation enrollment, budget, again, 106 times 20,000. You got there, the required minimum, I just showed you how that got calculated by the state. The next piece is 37,920. That's Winchendon's share of our transportation and operating assessment. So we took the net amount from the budget summary that I showed you, which is transportation, less transportation aid and E&D, and that was 524,080. And Winchendon, we saw your percentage represented 7.24% of that. So that's where that number comes from. The next component is the capital assessment side, which is the 500,000 for capital, less 200,000 from E&D, leaving a net of 300,000. And Winchendon represented 5.87% of that. That's where the 17,617 comes in. For a proposed assessment of $706,060, or an increase from year over year of $3,952. And what I'd like to do for you on the right is break out the town's portion per pupil. So simply, it's the total assessment divided by the foundation enrollment number, which is the town is contributing $6,661 per pupil. Next slide does everything I just talked to you about, but for every community. It just shows you the whole snapshot. So you can see what's happening in every town, how their foundation enrollment is, they're required, what the assessments are, and total assessments. The last slide just talks, just points out where Monty Tech falls amongst the vocational schools in the state as of FY21 per pupil expenditures. So we're about right in the middle of the pack, the lower third. We're spending approximately total 21,600 per pupil. Just to give you an idea of comparison against our other schools. Excuse me, that's my presentation, and I'm happy to answer your questions.
Should I pass out the quizzes?
Yes, I think they're ready, there was no question. Quiz.
Questions for Mr. Parker?
Well, it's mostly just curious, the revenue that you receive for like the dental work and building the homes and stuff like that, where does that usually fall into?
So for building homes, we don't receive revenue. We
No.
only work for Habitat for Humanity right now, or we only work for nonprofits. So we see no funds for that.
Oh, okay.
Yep, we don't do that any longer. What we get for like our auto tech program.
Vet science, auto
Vet
body,
science,
culinary,
yeah,
cosmetology.
cosmetology. They have what's called revolving funds, so they operate like a business. So, say culinary, they purchase all the food they serve at the restaurant from the revolving, and the revenue goes back in to help purchase the food. So that you don't see any of those reflected in this budget, because the revenues offset the expenses for
Okay.
those. Yep,
It's
so that's how all
like
our
our
vocational.
enterprise funds.
Exactly,
Yeah.
exactly an enterprise fund.
Okay.
I gotta speak my town speak. Excess and deficiency is free cash. Enterprise fund.
Job well done, and
Oh,
thank you.
Yeah, basically.
You guys are fantastic.
It's school budgeting and state financing is tough at the best of times, but every time you give the presentation, I
Pick up
glean
something.
something more that I
Yeah.
didn't quite understand all the nuances of before.
Yeah. funny, it had me thinking about required net school spending, because I know on the, for Winchendon, there are, some years get a budget that's probably 300,000 more than required net school spending. But the town will still end up getting dinged for not having met required net school spending. So, I'm thinking it's got something to do with the formula that combines it, you know, where the kids go to school.
Yeah.
And, I don't know what yet, but it's
Is it,
it
what's
gives me-
included, what's
gives me-
not?
Yeah, when we
Correct.
talked about how they
Yeah.
calculate that, it's the town, it's what the town has to spend on net school spending. Some of which goes to Monty Tech, some of which goes to the town school. Not what it has to spend necessarily on its own school system,
Right.
although you'd think that the two numbers would come together. But I think
Yeah.
Yeah.
there's something involved with that formula that has created a shortfall in some.
Yeah.
Well, again, we really appreciate the lecture.
No, Joe.
And I'm sure you appreciate Mr. Dixon's assistance.
Yes,
That's right.
we do, his insistence, how we
Duly noted.
I'm very much interested to see how the vocational partnership program.
Yeah.
Oh,
that's
us
exciting.
too.
Sounds like there
Yeah.
are logistical hurdles to.
Fewer than, I mean, when we switched to that, because we originally had proposed doing a morning, afternoon program. The sending districts said, actually, we would prefer the weekly week, and that made it easier for us because the original program, we would have had to deal with lunches and switching the kids
Oh, yeah.
and transportation. Now we don't have to worry about any of that, because we already have buses that drive through these towns. So when they tell us which kids they've selected, we'll find the nearest bus stop from Monty Tech is by that kid's house and tell you, go to that bus stop, so they'll just get on our bus and
Yeah.
come to school, so there'll be no additional transportation.
So are there any criteria, common criteria from district to, you know, town to town?
It's literally, we told them, you decide who and how you're picking kids.
Taking yourself completely off the
We
hook.
are completely out,
Yeah.
so.
Yeah.
And I will admit, it was fun that when, and the three superintendents are fantastic, and they're taking a risk doing this, and we appreciate it. But it was fun when it settled in with them and they said, oh, now we're the ones who are picking the students.
Yeah.
The
So
reality
they'll
of
get
that
their,
was-
kids will get their academics on the week that they're back in
Correct.
district,
Yeah.
which would be easier for the district to totally devote themselves 5
Correct.
days
Yeah.
to that group of kids and then.
Yes.
So that would be good,
Yeah,
yeah.
they
I
did
can see
say,
that,
they were looking to cohort the students,
Right,
and they thought that might be easier.
it's a
so.
model that they use in New Hampshire,
yeah,
some
Ooh.
of
yeah,
the,
they do,
Keene, but
Yeah.
there's a Cheshire
Ooh.
Center that's
Well,
integrated into Keene High School.
yeah.
Kids come from different towns and different
Yeah.
weeks, so there's some model there as to how they get their
There's
academics.
one up in
wow.
the Lakes District that does the same thing.
Yeah.
I'd be interested, yeah, to see how they do that.
was there
Well,
anything?
we thank you
No,
very
no,
much.
thank
We
you.
thank you
appreciate
very
it.
much.
No, no, Thursday night, as they said, it's educational and I'm excited about that new program, because it definitely expands opportunity to kids who really need it.
We're hoping for
Yeah.
We've
that.
gotta come up with some way of solving that issue, because,
Talk about the changes, you know, in all the schools we used to have, the wood shops, the electric shops, the metal shops. And I bet you people are kicking themselves now that they didn't keep some of those.
so they couldn't keep,
I know, but now we want them,
yeah.
Exactly.
It'd be nice to have some alternative programs
Yeah.
for kids,
Yeah.
but
yeah.
there's still that basic difference between, you know, the formula, I guess, that I look at. I mean, I think it's a formula issue that hasn't necessarily changed the way the world of work has changed, and the investments are a little bit different,
Mhm.
and more technology. I don't have an answer for that, but,
The technology is a big thing though, because people will say, well, you know, mechanics, well, our cars today are not what the cars were 20 years ago, and I'm sorry, but the kid that was a really great mechanic 20 years ago would be totally befuddled today.
oh no, you need to change the times,
Yeah.
don't get me wrong, I mean, the mission is
Yeah.
still there, and
Yeah.
the world of work is changing, so
Yeah.
the schools need to change. But there is a segment of the student population.
Yeah, we have to
that
figure
got
out what
left
to do.
behind.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And that's where we gotta figure out how to make it work for those kids.
But this is a really good step. I was really nice to see, because I was just leaving when you were bringing in the adults at night, so it was really nice to see that it took off and it's doing really well.
Yes.
Yeah, we actually, we had our first, we had the first couple of groups, you know, finish, we said, thank you for
Yeah.
that. We said, you know what, they deserve a graduation ceremony. So we
Yeah.
actually did a graduation ceremony,
Yeah.
we did another
Right.
course. Their families were able to come, their kids were able to come and watch them cross the stage.
Which
It was
is really
nice.
good, because it's really good for the kids to say, hey, my mom and dad could
Right,
you know,
right.
generate themselves at their
100%.
age, and they think 30's old.
And
I mean,
I'm not sure if you said it when you gave the presentation, that's a free program
yeah,
to the adults in welding, culinary,
not
HVAC.
amazed more
That's
people don't
200
avail
hours.
themselves of it.
They get,
Yeah.
the tuition is free, they get all of their tools and equipment provided to
Yeah.
them free.
And
But
certificate at
there's
the end
very
of it.
clear attendance
Yeah.
requirements.
Yes,
If you're
it's a
gonna-
commitment.
You're
Yeah.
gonna commit to this program, you're not gonna miss, you're not
Right.
gonna be missing
Right.
class. You
Which-
can't have someone who's
But
gonna
you
just.
Which is-
should, right?
yeah.
Right.
Right.
Agreed.
Yeah,
Right.
absolutely.
So it's an awesome, we keep expanding it,
Yeah.
so.
That's great.
I
That's
mean,
great.
the state was good with that, so, awesome program.
Right. Any other questions or comments for?
I move to adjourn,
Tammy?
Ooh,
or did you want the public this week?
I'm good.
Thank you very much.
thank you, I'm glad to know that you're the one that moves with your.
Yes, I'm telling flashbacks, so.
All in favor of adjourning?
Yes.
For the record, it's 7:40.
7:40.